Hey everybody, this is John again. Thanks for stopping by. If you've been following along on my channel, J Wood Fly Fishing on YouTube, you know I've got a couple of videos already on doing this fly. This is the Scimitar Shrimp. It's part of the Scimitar series of saltwater flies, which includes the Salt Scimitar, a baitfish version, and this shrimp, and something I like to call the boogie crab. But I wanted to redo this one because after tying several hundred of these things, I found a way to speed up the process. In the beginning, I was using these CCT fibers and putting them in different layers, 3 different layers, and then having to trim each layer, and that was taking up a lot of time. So I found a way to shorten that time frame. Now this uses 6 different bundles of these CCT fibers. That's Cascade Crest Tools fibers. They come in these hanks like this with all these bundles, and each one of these bundles has got an individual binding wrap on it that keeps them from tangling up together. And I'm going to show you real quick. I'm just cutting these off, the ones that we're going to use for this. And each layer of this uses 2 of these bundles. The bottom layer, which is, let's call it the belly, has 2 bundles of white. The middle layer has a bundle of tan and a bundle of white, and then the top layer has 2 bundles of tan. So let's get started. First off, the hook is a Umpqua XS420, and it's a pretty heavy saltwater hook. I like the bend and the angle of the point on this, especially for these flies, because these are as weedless as you're going to get. This will swim through anything practically, and you very, very seldom ever get hung up on anything. Alright, back to the fibers real quick. So I've cut these bundles of fibers off, and you can see here these little areas where it's really tight. That's where that binding wrap is. And I'm just taking this brush and I put that down on my pant leg because it gives a backing. There we go, and get that off of there, and I start towards the end of the bundle and just brush that out. And once I get the fibers brushed out with that binding wrap off of there, that's what it looks like. It's one bundle instead of 2 smaller bundles. And this is the white and tan. Get these brushed out. Now normally what I like to do is, if I'm going to tie these, I like to tie a half a dozen or so, maybe more. And I will get all of my fibers prepped ahead of time and line them up on my table. I've got a pretty good sized tying space here that I work off of. And then I'll get my hair that needs to be stacked off the bucktail, which we'll get to in a minute. I'll get that prepped. So there's my tan bundles. Now we're ready to rock. Our thread is 6/0 uni in pink. You can see I'm getting towards the end. Hope I don't run out. I'm going to start that about a little over 1 hook eye length back behind the hook eye. I'm leaving the tag on this thing because I'm using it to help me. It's kind of like a guide, getting these wraps right up against one another as I wrap towards the back. When I come around on my side of the hook, having that tag end pulled really tight towards me keeps me in line with my bobbin. Pop that off. Now I'm going to make some open wraps to where it hangs right about even with the point of the barb of the hook, not the point. And where I stopped wrapping was right behind the point of the hook. And I just loop that back forward. Now I've got my polar chenille. This is tan. And I'm going to tie it in. I've got one end trimmed nice and even. Let's open that thread up. I'm going to spin it counterclockwise to get it to flatten out because it's not wanting to cooperate with me. There we go. Now it'll wrap where I want it to. Catch that in and go back to where I finished those open wraps. I'm just going to spin that a little bit more and trim this excess off. Now I'm going to wrap. And again, I'm going to completely cover the hook shank with touching wraps of thread. If I get a little bit of open gap, it's not a big deal. We're going to cover this up in a minute. But I want that to be an undertone of pink, and then we're going to use this polar chenille as a ribbing and legs on this fly. As I wrap it around, I'm going to pull those fibers back so they don't get trapped, and I really want to be careful about not getting them trapped on this particular fly because we're going to groom them away from what will be the belly of the fly in just a minute and add some Solarez UV resin. So now I've got 5 wraps on there. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And as I come around on the 6th one, I'm going to go perpendicular with my chenille to the hook shank. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to build the start of my shoulder that the fibers are going to go on. Go ahead and clip that. Now I'm going to open my thread up again by spinning it counterclockwise again. And that's counterclockwise looking down onto the bobbin. Now I want to build a small taper. And if you come around here, right where that 6th wrap starts, you can see that as I changed it and I went perpendicular instead of going at an angle, that's where I want to wrap my thread taper to, and that is my stopping point. I don't ever want to wrap behind that point from this step on. Now I'm going to take my scissors, run them across the top, and that kind of parts those fibers. And I've got over here, I've got a little sponge cloth that I keep moisture on, and I'm going to use it to help me groom these polar fibers down and away from what's going to end up being the belly of the hook. Be careful you don't get a lot of moisture in the thread on here, and I know you can't see part of what I'm doing right now because my big mitt is in the way. And I am using a Solarez Duro finish. It is a medium viscosity, and it's a mix of hard and flexible resin. And I love it for this. One of the things I love about it is the fact that if I get one of these fibers caught in here, I can cut it with my razor blade that I keep here on my vise. Now I'm going to get a thin layer right there. And what I did with this is I kind of worked it around the sides just a little bit so that I'm not just on what was the top of the hook shank, but I'm onto the sides also. I'm not sure you can see that, but once I've got that first layer on there and started curing it, I'm going to add a little bit more. And I like this nozzle that comes with this stuff because it gives you great control. And I want to kind of build that up, and what that's going to do is it's going to accentuate the rib effect created by the core of that polar chenille, and it's going to make this thing super duper durable. The first ones I tied to this, I did not put that on there. That kind of creeped around the side on me, but I'm going to just hold it like that and let it droop back down. There we go. And I'll hit it, and I'm going to let it cure. I don't normally cure it this fast, but in the interest of time for the video, I'm speeding it up. Now you can probably see I've got a little bit of a bump right there. And I don't really like that, so I'm going to take my razor blade, and because this is part flex and part hard resin, I can actually shave that off with my razor blade. And if that was the thin or thick hard resin, I would not be able to do that. So that gives you an idea of one of the reasons I really like this resin. The other one is because it builds up really well, and it cures beautifully. This is one of the better curing of all the solar resins. I just really, really love this stuff. I know I sound kind of like a commercial, but that's how much I like this particular resin. Alright, now we're going to get that cured, and like I said, I don't normally cure it this fast, but I'm doing this in the interest of time for this video. I'm going to flip this over, and I want to get my hook in there right up next to the back end of the body, and then I want it level. I want my hook shank level for this portion of it. Now I'm going to get the moisture off of my sponge cloth over there and lay these legs of this polar chenille down, and that is because that's going to get these out of the way when we trim our fibers. Now I'm starting with the 2 bundles of white CCT fibers that I just groomed out, and you can see I'm holding them at an angle, and I'm just going to bind them back to where the Solarez on the bottom of the fly is. And you can see I've created kind of a V by pulling them up around the bottom of the shank. Now the next layer is the white and tan, and I'm just going to lay that right on top with my thread at the front of where I tied those white fibers in. Catch that in so it's about the middle of the shank on top. That's a little bit to the side, there we go. And then I'm going to hold it, pull it back, and wrap. And I've got that turned sideways so you can see it. And then come back up here. And then this one, sorry my mitt's in the way for this, I'm going to fold that forward, and I'm holding it out kind of to the side, and then catching it right there. Let me get this up here where I can see exactly what's going on. There we go, and I'm going to wrap it back to where I wrapped the other. And I've got it on there like this. And you want to create that V on either side of the hook. Now, the old process was I had already trimmed these, and I'd trim them each one, and it's taking up time, and then I would put the antennas on. But this process now, I'm skipping the antennas for the moment, and I'm just going to repeat that process with the tan and tan bundles, and lock that in again in a V shape, and then bring it here. Now I'm going to cut this a little bit short, or a little bit longer than it's going to end up, and kind of groom these. And I want to keep this to the side, either side of the hook point. I'm not grooming them to where they're coming together up top. Also, you'll notice I was very careful not to catch those polar chenille fibers. Now I'm going to take this and turn it upside down, and carefully, and this takes a little practice, maybe getting this angle just right, but I am going to cut that. There we go. And that comes to a point. And this is going to be about 2 1/4 inches from right behind the eye of the hook to the tip of those fibers. That is the length that I'm going for. Now I'm going to tip that up to where the hook shank is up at about a 15-degree angle. Now I want 4 crystal flash fibers, strands, whatever you want to call them. I've got 5 there, so I want to pull one out. And these are bonefish tan for this tan fly. And I'm going to lay them in there, and I've got this already measured because I've done so many of these, where this section of the strands going back is about 3.5 to 4 inches. I want it really long. And I'm going to catch it in right behind the eye of the hook, put just a little pressure on it, and then tie it in. And it should lay right in between the V that was created by the CCT fibers, right dead center on top. Now I'm going to fold these back, the ones that were pointing over the front of the fly, and bind them down, and then bind it back to where everything was bound down. And for the very last step, I'm going to put on some Bucktail. I want to put just a touch of this Gorilla Super Glue gel on there to help bind that on the bottom side. So I'm going to put just a touch. You don't want much. You want like a half of a drop. Now for this portion of the fly, you can see how I've taken the hair off of this Bucktail. I want to put one layer that's just the colored Bucktail, and then I'm going to put a second layer that is the darker middle hair, and I'm going to put that on top just to add a little bit of color. Now I've already cut that hair off of the tail. You can see it's not a giant bundle. I've groomed out all of the short hairs, and I'm going to measure this on my scale here on my vise so that it is about 2.5 inches long. I've gotten pretty good at doing that. That was almost exactly right. And then trim the butts. So I've got a nice even end on that. And I'll get that positioned. And I want to have a couple inches of thread out of my bobbin. Sorry, I got a fiber there that wants to get in the way. There we go. And I'm just going to take this and hold it down at an angle. And don't put it down on top of the hook straight at an angle with the shank. You want it at about almost a 45-degree angle to the shank. And I'm going to come around with one very loose loop and push that down lightly with my material hand as I snug it with the thread. And bind that down real good. And now at this point you can check and see if it's right up on top of the hook, because I want it to ride right over those materials and right on top of the point of the hook. And the way I laid that on there, you can see it kind of slightly splayed around the tie-in point for the fibers, but the bulk of it stays right up on top. Now I'm going to bring my thread back. Now we're going to put the dark fibers on there, or the dark hairs. And again, we don't want a whole bunch. I am just adding a little bit of color and variegation to it. And that's about what I'm going to use right there, or about what I'm going to get off. And then I will clip that right at the skin. And then I'm going to grab the ends and pull all of the short stuff out. I don't want that short stuff in there. I don't want a whole lot of hair. You can see as I'm working more and more, getting that out. Now the length of this is going to be just about 2.5 inches. I'm going to put a little moisture on there and gather that together so I can see it. And I'm just going to hold it up here, dry off my fingers so that it doesn't stick to my left hand, and hold that up there, and I can see I'm just almost exactly the right length. So I'm just going to even up those ends, gather that a little bit better, even it again. I want it really even when it goes on there. And I'm kind of repeat that process that we did with the first layer of hair. You can see I'm going towards the ends as I do that when I bind it down, not towards the back of where I'm eventually going to wrap it. And I get that in there and I'm pulling upward, and that's going to keep those things pointing in the direction that I want, which is up and back, so that it guards the hook point. And between the bucktail hair and the fibers that are on there, that's what makes this fly so weedless, and it gives it this awesome shape. And it looks like a fleeing shrimp. I sent a picture of a bunch of these on my desk to a friend who fishes the saltwater a lot, and I hadn't even mentioned that they were on there. I was sending him a picture of something else. He goes, "What are those? Those look just like shrimp." So I explained to him what they were, and you can see now that real shrimp appearance. This is supposed to imitate the carapace, the nose end of the carapace of the shrimp. And then you've got your little mouth parts here coming out with the short crystal flash and then the antenna. And I put 4 on there just in case one breaks off, and it just also makes them a little more visible. Now the very last step on this, we're going to add a little bit more of this Duro finish. And I'm just going to put that right over all of the thread. And I didn't do this when I first started tying these. I didn't put it over the polar chenille, and I didn't put it over the thread. And especially fish like speckled trout or any of the mackerels, fish like that, when they smack this thing and they've got those super sharp teeth, it would cut the polar chenille so you don't have any legs, and it would cut the thread on the head, and the whole fly would fall apart. But putting this on there has made this fly extremely durable. If you don't have a UV resin handy, try something like Sally Hansen's Hard as Nails and just put coats, if nothing else, over the thread head. You just want to protect that thread because, like I said, with those razor sharp teeth on some of those fish, it cuts the heck out of it, and then the next thing you know, your fly's falling apart. So I didn't get my thread cut short enough right there whenever I cut that off. Again, this resin, which you cannot do this as easily with the hard resins, but with this Duro finish, which is half hard and half flexible, you can cut that right off. And I don't need to put more on there, but this is not quite as even as I would like it on this side, so I'm just going to even it up and then add a little more on this side. And I just want to kind of slope that in right there on between the head and the belly. Be careful not to get a bunch on these fibers because you want them to be able to move, and that's one of the things that makes this fly so effective in the water, is that the way we have tied these fibers on there in a V over the hook, this thing has a pulsing action. When you stop it and it falls, they open up, and then when you move it, they come together. It's a strip, strip, strip. It's a really enticing action. And like I said, it's almost completely weedless. So you can fish this through grass, where areas where your buddies fishing different flies or baits are going to be stopping to clear their hooks all the time. This thing is going to swim right through them. And because of the shape and how shrimpy this thing looks, you are going to catch some fish if they have an inclination to feed on shrimp at all. And there you have it. That's the tan version. I've done that in a lot of different colors. Play around with it. When you go to order these CCT fibers, they're very inexpensive. The shipping from Cascade Crest may be a little more expensive than even what you want to order, but these fibers last so long. You'll get so many flies out of it, even though you're having to pay shipping costs, which I know have gone through the roof recently. It's still a good value. But check these things out. Tie up a few. I know you're going to catch some saltwater fish with these, especially if you're fishing in the flats and redfish, speckled trout, what have you, or chasing shrimp. They will eat this fly. Check out my friend Nick Fly Fishing on YouTube or Instagram. He has been fishing these things almost exclusively for a couple of years, fishing the salt scimitar and the scimitar shrimp, and then when the crabs are out, the boogie crab. So until next time, I hope you enjoyed this one. Peace, love, and fly fishing, my friends.